There are musicians who care about staying relevant. There are artists who care solely about self-expression. And then, very rarely, there are those who choose to build an entire life as a work of art. Bryan Ferry belongs to that elusive final category. Not merely a singer, not merely a style icon, but a man who understood that beauty, restraint, eroticism, and discipline could coexist, that glamour did not need to be garish, and that danger could be implied rather than acted out. This is not a video about clothes alone, it's about philosophy, music, taste, women, melancholy, and that rare ability to move through excess without being burned and destroyed by it. Bryan Ferry shows us what happens when a man chooses not to rebel against culture, but to curate it and bend it to his will. Bryan Ferry did not grow up in a glamorous world. He was born in post-war England, the son of a coal miner, a world defined by austerity and limits. This was not an environment that would have encouraged or supported a young Bryan Ferry's fantasies. It was a time and a place where utility mattered much more than beauty. And yet, from early on, Ferry sensed that his life did not have to be confined to what he was born into. What separated him from many of his peers was not just talent or ambition, but taste. Ferry studied art formally, painting, composition, theory. He absorbed ideas about symbolism and presentation long before he ever stood in front of a microphone. And this matters deeply because Ferry didn't approach music as a raw, emotional urge like Mick Jagger or Iggy Pop. He approached it more like a design. Music, fashion, image, language, these were materials to be arranged. Later, cultural critic Peter York would describe him as the best possible example of the ultimate art-directed existence. A man who treated his own life as a carefully curated aesthetic project. Bryan Ferry is proof that refinement is a deliberate choice, a set of moves that consciously collect and compound over the years. When Ferry emerged with Roxy music, popular music was in a big shift. The glam rock era didn't value authenticity in the same way that the folk scene had or the punk rock scene later would. Glam rock wasn't about dirt under the fingernails, it was about posing, it was about desire, the theatrical power of performance. But Roxy music stood out among their contemporaries like Sweet, Slade, T-Rex, because Ferry and his bandmate, Brian Eno, understood something that most musicians didn't, that the image wasn't a distraction from the art, it was an intrinsic part of the art. The album covers alone told a story. They posed women like sirens. They were styled, sensual, untouchable. Not girlfriends in denim jackets, but muses, icons, fantasies. And this unsettled people. Critics accused Ferry of objectifying his models. But these critiques missed the point. Ferry did not present women as disposable conquests. He presented them as mythic, elevated, dangerous in a kind of femme fatale way. He understood that what made these women desirable was not that you could take them to bed easily, but that they were so mysterious they may as well be from a different planet. In this way, Ferry restored something to popular culture, the idea that elegance and sexuality could and should coexist. By the mid-1970s, Bryan Ferry was no longer simply a musician. He had become a persona. In 1974, he released his second solo album. On the cover, Ferry stands beside a swimming pool wearing a pristine white dinner jacket, looking detached, like a still from a French film. Rolling Stone dubbed him the dandy of the bizarre. It was an extraordinary phrase because Bryan Ferry wasn't bizarre in a kind of chaotic way. He was bizarre because he rejected the expected posturing and posing of rock stardom. While others smashed hotel rooms, Ferry was more likely to redecorate them, Pitchfork would later write, "To be Bryan Ferry in 1974 was like being Bob Dylan in 1965, Clark Gable in 1939, and Oscar Wilde in 1895. That sentence places Ferry in a lineage not of musicians, but of cultural architects. Simon Le Bon described him as a synonym for cool and likened him to Cary Grant. And that comparison is precise. Like Cary Grant, Ferry understood that true masculinity can and should be sophisticated. Not pretentious necessarily, but mysterious and inviting. By the 1980s, Ferry underwent his most interesting transformation. This is where his philosophy and music became fully aligned. With the final Roxy music album, Avalon, and 1985's Boys and Girls, he crystallized the genre that would later become known as Sophisti-pop. The sound was luxurious and polished, but had a haunting flavor. Argentine tango echoes, New Orleans Creole atmosphere, and European romanticism. This was not music for stadiums, it was music for late nights, for hotel bars, for slow drives, for internal monologues. These records introduced a new masculine archetype to the 1980s. The debonair man who has seen enough to be quiet, who desires deeply but knows that desire is fleeting, who understands that luxury cannot cure loneliness, but it can make it seem more poetic. At a time when most artists would release a new album every year, Ferry took 3 to 5 years to make his, saying, "You just have to try and live a life in between records, and the records are a response to that." That's the philosophy of a man who refuses to manufacture experience. He has to live first, then he can reflect and create. Bryan Ferry's relationship with women is central to his work, but often misunderstood. Yes, he sang about women constantly, and yes, he used them as muses, models, sources of inspiration. But Bryan Ferry didn't sing like a conqueror, he sang like an observer. The women in Bryan Ferry's world aren't submissive. They are powerful, enigmatic, and often emotionally unavailable. Often, it's they who are the ones to leave. Ferry's understanding of male to female dynamics is not one of domination, but fascination. He circles women rather than captures them. He studies them, mythologizes them. There is a sensuality there, but also a humility. And crucially, Ferry has never descended into vulgarity. His sexuality is always implied, his lust restrained. That balance is difficult to strike and incredibly scarce in today's world. But a life lived as art is not without its costs. When a man aestheticizes himself too carefully, he risks becoming distant to the everyday. When emotion is so stylized, it risks never being fully released. Ferry's music continues to have an unresolved longing. You get the sense that maybe in choosing control, Ferry sacrificed chaos, and perhaps chaos is necessary for certain kinds of intimacy. Yet, unlike so many artists of his era, Ferry never imploded. He suffered no public addictions, no grotesque self-parodies, and he holds no bitterness from decades gone by. Although he's too private to reveal this, I get the sense that Ferry has a kind of inner discipline that has kept him grounded. What makes Bryan Ferry truly exceptional is not just the glamour, it's the restraint. Despite his wealth, fame, lovers, cultural significance, he remains soft-spoken, almost shy. He doesn't like to explain himself, he certainly never preaches. He just likes to do his thing, on his own terms. Today, his legacy is everywhere, in luxury branding, fashion editorials, modern singers, and this quiet revival of masculine elegance that we see today. Bryan Ferry represents a path that few men take, a man who escaped his origins, built a world of beauty, and tasted danger and excess without being consumed by it. And he understood that the highest form of masculinity is not aggression, but taste. In an age of noise, Bryan Ferry reminds us of something that's now rather radical. Being refined is not a weakness. Sexuality has nothing to do with vulgarity. And art is not something that you make once, but rather something that you become. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd like to remind you that the window is currently open to apply for our private members club. You'll find the link down in the description.